Hello, this is our third lecture of Chapter 1 for Econ 4, and this will be the last chapter for the regular part of, last lecture of the regular part of Chapter 1, and there'll be one more lecture on the appendix in Chapter 1. Two topics we're going to cover in this lecture. One is the economic approach, and then the second topic we'll be looking at the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. First, we come across the economic approach, which is a way that economists go about their essentially job in analyzing the economy. And after we analyze the economy, what do we do with that information? And so there's really two different approaches. One is positive economics, and the other one is known as normative economics. And this class really is about positive economics. This is how we collect data. This is how we learn about the economy. So positive economics simply is to find out how the economy operates. And that's what your textbook is all about. That's what these lectures are all about. We are trying to be objective. We're not trying to formulate opinions. We're just trying to figure out how the economy works. If you do this policy, what is the likely result? If you do that policy, again, what is the likely result? It deals in testable statements. This is the scientific method. We try to learn again how the economy operates, how certain variables interact with each other, and try to build on that to get a good understanding of economic activity and the economic system. Two examples of positive economics, and when I say positive economics, that means again we're using testable statements. And two examples are right here. If the price of pizzas increase, people will buy less pizzas. There's no opinion in that statement. There's no judgment. We're simply trying to figure out if the price of pizzas increase, what impact that will have on people buying pizzas. And so we can collect data on this. We can see whenever the price of pizzas go up, and we can see how people respond to that in terms of the number of pizzas they purchase. Another example would be when Disneyland increases its entrance fees, Disneyland's revenue increases. I have no idea if that is correct or not, but again, this is what we can collect data on this, and then we can learn whether or not the statement is valid or not. As it turns out, it probably is valid. Little data here. This looks at the Disney's price increase at Disneyland, and this is in Southern California. And so we have here, if you go back to 2000, it would cost you $43 to have a one-day pass. And you can see it's been pretty much a steady increase going over to 2020, which right before the pandemic hit, they raised their price to $154. And that is the price on the high demand days, especially the weekends. And you can see it's been a steady increase going back to, again, 2000 to 2020. And the thing about that is that the emissions has not gone down. Disneyland has a problem. It's a good problem, but their problem is that they have too many people coming in. So they've been trying to raise the price, essentially to try to limit how many people come to the park, and it simply is not working. So it's probably a good bet that when they raise their fees, they bring in more revenue. It's not guaranteed, by the way. We'll learn this later on when we talk about elasticity, that sometimes if you raise your price, you actually lose a lot of customers, and therefore your revenue goes down. That's not the case with Disneyland. They also have their annual passes. And again, the same situation here. Look at going back to 2004 to 2015. This was the annual pass with no blackout dates. So it was $329 back in 2004. By 2015, it got up to $800. And then this number over here was the price for 2016, and it increased dramatically from 2015 to 2016. And now, right before again the pandemic hit, it was almost $1,500 for the pass plus with no blackout dates, and that is a heck of a lot of money. And so they've been raising their prices not just on the daily entrance fees, but also on the annual passes. And again, the attendance at Disneyland is very high. They've lost very few customers, if any, and all this increase in the price of the passes and the daily entrance fees is pure profit to Disneyland. Again, these are all numbers here. We're just trying to figure out how the connection is between Disney pricing and their attendance. And again, this represents positive economics because they're pretty much just collecting data. Now, the other approach is normative economics. And this really is beyond the scope of the course. This is where we decide what we should and should not do. This is quite important, but again, this is beyond the scope of our course pretty much. My job and the job of economics in college is to teach you positive economics, but how you use this out there in your own personal life is normative economics. Here it's subjective. We're trying to figure out again what's the best policy, what's the one that's maybe fair, what's the one that we should do, and what should we avoid. This deals in non-testable statements. These are opinions. So one right here, it is not fair to increase tax rates on the wealthy, and that is not testable. Now on an exam, what I would ask you is that tell me first of all if this is normative or positive economics, and the answer is normative, and I would say why. What about the statement exactly makes it normative? And don't just say that it's an opinion. Tell me why it's an opinion. What exactly in the statement makes it opinion? And the answer is right here. That is the opinion. There's no way we can test for what's fair and what's not fair. And therefore, it's not testable. It simply is an opinion. You may think it's you may think it's fair. I may think it's not fair. I think it's fair to raise taxes on everyone else except me. That works for me. Another one is people with income over $100,000 should not receive Social Security benefits. And again, that is an opinion, but why is it an opinion? Right there. Should not. We can't test for should not. That is your own personal opinion. Right now, there's no income limit on receiving Social Security benefits. If you're a multi-billionaire, you still can receive Social Security benefits as long as you paid your Social Security taxes for at least 40 quarters or 10 years. Now, the way we use this, put it together, is that the economic approach is that we use positive economics to learn how the economy operates. Then we use normative economics to take all that information here in and decide what we should and should not do. And then we implement that right here, and that is our policy. So if you want to raise taxes, if you want to increase spending on Medicare, if you want to have increased unemployment benefits, that is your economic policy. First, we collect data. We figure out how the economy is going on. What is the likely results of our certain policy? Then here we decide what we should and should not do. And that can be done in Washington, D.C., Sacramento. It could be done at the Chafee board meetings. Corporate offices, they're the ones who decide what the company should do. They decide what the politicians decide what government's going to do. And then we implement our policy right there. The last thing to talk about is the difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics. This course is micro, of course, but before we talk about micro, let's talk a bit about macroeconomics. A lot of you have taken macroeconomics, or you will need to take it, and it's a concern about the economy as a whole. So we look at the big picture of the economy. We concentrate on three main areas: unemployment, which is the percent of the labor force that's without work and looking for work. We have inflation, which is the increase in prices. And then we have GDP growth, where GDP is your gross domestic production. And that represents the nation's total production of goods and services. And so in macroeconomics, we spend a lot of time with aggregates, which represents totals. So we look at total spending, nationwide total spending, nationwide total income, nationwide total production. And our goals in macroeconomics is to have unemployment as low as possible. You would find out in that class we really can't get it down to 0, but we try to get it down as low as we can without having another problem, which is inflation. We'd like inflation to be as low as possible, but again, being 0 probably is not the best number. We have learned that there's sort of a trade-off here between unemployment and inflation. When unemployment gets really low, that tends to put up a pressure on prices. And when unemployment is really high, then prices tend not to be a problem. We also want to have steady long-term growth in GDP. Okay. And then this class, Microeconomics, is concerned about the economy on a small scale. We look at the choices made by individual consumers and firms, individual economic agents, and their choices, how these choices affect the markets for particular goods and services. So pretty much, if you want to have a short definition of microeconomics, it's the study of markets. So we learn how markets operate. We learn the various players in the markets. We have separate chapters for consumers and producers. And then we put it together when we talk about different kind of markets. We have competitive markets. We have non-competitive markets. The goal in microeconomics is pretty simple. It's two goals. We want to have markets out there that do two things. One is they produce at lowest possible cost. That's good because it means we're not wasting our resources, and it means we can use our resources to go further. And we call that productive efficiency. In Chapter 2, we'll look at that in more detail. And then we want markets not just to produce the lowest possible cost, but also produce the things that we like in the right amounts. So we want to produce things that we value the most, which is not that easy. So we want to have just the right number of apples, the right number of oranges, the right number of pizzas, and so forth. And if we can do that, we call that allocative efficiency. So here we're producing efficient, and here we're producing the right combination of goods and services. And I'll stop there.